Hi guys, my name is Spilo. I have hair in my eyes. Hi guys, my name is Spilo, and this is going to be the complete Wuyang guide from Bronze to Grandmaster if you're looking for full feedback on how to play Wuyang at really any rank. Not just the ability breakdowns, but how do you actually play the character, how do you position, how do you use your abilities, how do you get started, along with a lot of actual useful text. This is the place to be. So for context, I've been coaching Overwatch for 7-8 years now. I've coached every character from Bronze all the way up to the professional level, and the new support character thing has a lot of really interesting nuances that we're going to be delving into, while focusing primarily on, like I said, how do you actually play the character. So we're gonna get started with general playstyle here. Biggest thing with Wuyang, and I always like to start with how do you actually position with the character, it's going to be medium range off angles. So anywhere from 15, 10, 20, 25, 30 meter, 40 meter, depending on the situation, off angles. And what an off angle essentially is if this is the choke, this is where the majority of my team is fighting, I'm gonna be stepping a little bit off to the side, looking to heal my team, looking to support my team, while looking to also to apply pressure onto the enemy backline, enemy front line, enemy DPS, whatever. And the reason why this is so good with Wuyang is that both his damage and his healing has range, which means that you don't have to be up and dirty with your tanks, up with your dirty with your TPS or your supports. You can provide a little bit of an objectivity off to the side, which allows for not only greater safety, because your team can still support you from here, but more importantly, you can actually see what's happening easier, and it means you don't get caught up in all the AoE ults, the AoE crap that's thrown on main. So you have better vision for your damage, better vision for your healing, and you get what we like to call a little bit of map control. So how do you actually play Wuyang from this angle? Well, heal what's close, whether that's tank DPS, you have phenomenal tank healing, phenomenal squish healing. We'll talk more about that later. And biggest thing is you need to prioritize damage. Now, we're not just gonna say prioritize damage just because damage is good and damage is great, but because Wuyang is built around cycling pressure. So you have a lot of healing, but it's not always available. So there's gonna be natural downtime where it's gonna be very important for you to apply damage. In addition to that, while Wuyang doesn't always have the highest damage stats, his damage is very efficient. And because his damage is very efficient, it means that every single shot from yours can actually lead to an elimination. You can freaking bend behind walls, and once you learn a couple of techs which I'm going to teach you, you're going to be able to do that a lot more effectively and actually lead to a lot of eliminations even before the fight even starts. Wave with your ability means usually you're going to be waving either yourself to keep yourself alive if you get pressured on that off angle, or if a teammate gets a lot of pressure, you can wave that teammate to heal them and to heal amp them so that you can support them better. And in the simplest way to think about how you're using your shift, which is your mobility cooldown, your current, is you're going to use this if you get pressured to rotate away, or if you don't get pressured and the enemy team is running away from you, you can even deepen your angle to go further into the sideline. So that's the general playstyle: medium range off angles, heal what's close, damage what's close, but put more of your priority on damage, wave yourself, shift yourself as you need to move around the map as necessary. And now we're gonna go into a little bit more detail on how do you actually use the abilities. So we're gonna start off with the current, which is gonna be the shift on PC, because that's the positioning, and then from there we'll go into the primary fire and so on. So we're gonna start off with a shift here, which is technically called the rushing torrent. So if I shift, you guys know what I mean, which essentially allows you to move around at a much greater speed. You actually have a little burst of mobility, and then you can use your jump to access greater heights. So there's a couple of little different techs you can do with this. We're not gonna talk about those today. We're gonna focus on more of like what is the fundamental of why you're actually using this ability. Basically, the way to think about shift is that it can be used as a defensive cooldown, kind of, sort of, but the more important thing is to be a little bit more responsive with what's happening to you before it gets really bad. Like, shift isn't Kiriko's teleport. It's not going to instantly teleport you through walls. You kind of have to anticipate the pressure and react quickly to be able to use it effectively. Now, that doesn't just mean rotating away from threats. If I'm on an off angle here and I'm getting dove, I need to shift away, but what if my team goes in and I'm not being pressured at all? Well, you might need to shift to rotate deeper to get a better sight line. Obviously, you're playing mid-range with Wuyang, but you're relatively flexible. You can get up and close and personal with some long-range sets like Widowmaker on a Zenyatta situationally, and you may want to keep your distance at all times versus characters like Reaper, Roadhog, and so on. So with Wuyang, it's more about finding what angle makes the most sense given the situation, and then using your shift to help keep that effective distance. In addition to that, don't forget that your shift also gives you a little bit of verticality, which means that on maps where the verticality is low enough for you to access, you can absolutely not just rotate and jump to high ground to get away from things, but before the fight even starts, you can take that superior position. The biggest thing that I can tell players that once you have the whole medium range off angle and you're poking and you're healing and you're poking and you're healing is please don't go back all the way to a person across the map if they need help, if there's something else that you could be doing. We like to call this peeling, which is essentially peeling back the banana peel to go help somebody else when they're under trouble. And that can be useful if they're very close to you, whether that's your tank, DPS, or the support, whatever. But a lot of the times, if you're taking an off angle, there's probably going to be something that's more valuable for you to be doing: a target to heal, an enemy to damage. And one of the big mistakes I see with Wuyang players, especially in low ranks, is that they have this priority that I have to keep the critical health target alive, even if they're all the way across the map. And the way the Overwatch works is it's opportunity cost. Whenever you choose to do something that is inconvenient, there's always something that you're missing out on that would be a lot more effective, that would also be more convenient, and probably wouldn't involve you going across the entire enemy team. So what I'm saying is, don't think that you can't peel and go back and help people, but do remember that that decision is going to cost you something, and make sure there's nothing else that you could be doing that's more effective. So let's talk about this weapon. We're going to be talking about both, obviously, his primary fire and his damage, and his secondary fire and his healing resource. Make a big splash. First things first, this primary fire, his damage, it's really important to learn the ground splash technique, which is simply using the fact that your splash on your primary fire has like incredibly forgiving damage. So if I hit a fully charged direct, that's going to be 100 damage. That's awesome, good job. But I can essentially get that same amount of damage by splashing the floor. And that, with the forgiving fall off that we have, it makes it a lot more consistent to land. Because with targets that are moving and strafing around a lot, it's very easy to miss these directs, especially if you're unfamiliar with the matchup. So I would almost always say, versus any target that is on the floor, aim either for their legs or aim for the ground in front of them. So even if you miss, you still get a significant portion of partial credit, and a side benefit of it actually hits multiple targets because there is splash damage as part of this primary fire. So get in the habit of, when you're taking duels, aiming for the legs, almost always. There are some exceptions to this rule, especially obviously up close and personal where you don't have your charged orb. When you get this close, there's no real point going for the splash anymore. You just need to be laying directs. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but from any range where you get your charged orb, you see this right there, that's where it gets charged. That noise, I'll do it without talking for a second. That noise is really important because that's your cue that the orb is now charged. Listen. Boom. That means it's gone from a lower damage orb to a higher damage orb, and as soon as your orb has reached that point, it is now a good orb to splash on the ground. So basically, any range from here on, you want to be bending your orbs. Obviously, at this range, I can't bend them fast enough, but from here on, you want to be bending your orbs to be able to get the splash damage. You'd be surprised at how far you can pull them down. Like, look at this range right now. Bam. Right there. You guys didn't see that. Right there, you can see actually how much control I get even towards the end. So aim for the ground, get the ground splash technique. That's basically universally useful at any range longer than 10-15 meters. The big thing with Wuyang's primary fire, obviously, is that it just demands constant attention. It is his gimmick. It's what makes him fun, but it's also what makes him effective. It's not just a cool tech that you have to do to control your orbs. It's the very definition of the character's value. His damage, his ability to do damage behind walls and to land accurate shots from across the map is the biggest reason why you would play Wuyang. And so it could be very easy to get caught up in healing. We'll talk about that more later, but the big thing is to allow yourself to devote most of your attention to setting yourself up on an angle and controlling your shots and hitting targets. That is why you're playing Wuyang. Putting more attention on your healing would be like focusing and cycling your harmony orbs the entire game as Zenyatta without actually using your primary fire. You're playing Wuyang for the primary fire of the damage. So actually take the time to practice that damage and use that damage, even if you're just learning the process. The other thing to keep in mind as well is don't just be deliberate with actually hitting your shots, but who am I actually shooting? We're not really gonna talk as much about target priority. To be honest with you, you're pretty good at shooting tanks, DPS supports, and you could do good damage versus everybody. But the key thing is that like whoever's on my angle, that's gonna be my #1 priority. So if there's a Genji fighting me, I need to hit my shots on that Genji. If nobody's on me, maybe I'll go for the back line. Zarya is overextended, make sure you hit the shots into Zarya. The big thing here is that just because you have splash damage doesn't mean that you should be just thinking about general pressure. A lot of Wuyang players will see a choke and they just kind of turn their brain off and aim their shots and they get the splash, and that's fine. But if you see an opportunity on a target that's low, hit the freaking target. Even in a low rank, you might not be able to always be able to secure the kill because your aim is bad, but if you even occasionally are able to finish off on that kill because you actually deliberately aim for that, it's going to be so valuable. So even if you don't fully trust your mechanics, force yourself to actually focus on being very deliberate with who you're aiming at and actually finishing off kills. It's so important for this character. In many ways, your best defense is even hitting that initial shot. The most important thing for living on an angle with Wuyang isn't just being able to shift away or hitting your wave, but actually as they engage on you is to hit that opening shot, because oftentimes with your splash and with your range, your best defense is hitting that opening shot, putting them at a disadvantage and forcing cooldowns early. Couple of little things with this primary fire. Up close, it's often better times in duels because you can't really charge your orbs to just shoot and melee combo. and just try to hit as many shots as you possibly can. You might think that that's really low damage, and it is. It's not good damage, but at the very least, you can use your shift and move erratically and jump over people's heads. So one of the things, you kind of treat yourself like a lower damage Lucio if people are able to close the distance on you. Obviously, your wave is really good up close as well, but obviously just focus on hitting melees and moving erratically up close. And finally, there is the tech where you can spam orbs without controlling them. So I can just keep going, and I can just keep putting damage on the choke without really controlling. The problem with this is very niche because it's only really useful for like shield break, because in any other situation, you really want to be slowing down your fire rate and deliberately hitting your shots. But if you're spamming at a shield, it's fine to do that. Why did I say that so awkwardly? Whatever. Okay, so let's talk about his heal. His heal resource is both passive and burst. And what I mean by that is it does a small amount of healing consistently that you can amplify by using your alternate fire. That consumes a resource in the middle of your screen. You can increase this resource by using a couple of his perks, but also by using his wave, which gives you some free resource like so. The crucial thing to point out here is that you should be allowing your passive heal to go on anybody that's aggressing, tank, DPS, whatever, and then when that target gets put under serious pressure, use your heal resource liberally until that person is full or you're low on resource, and then go back to doing damage. As I said earlier, the entire way that this character works is you don't have 100% uptime with your heal, and you're not supposed to. You're supposed to have these downtimes where you just don't really have any heal resource left, and that just allows you to just be like, well, I'm doing as much healing as I can, time to do some damage. That's baked into the character, and one of the big mistakes I see with a lot of lower rank Wuyangs is they'll use some of the heal resource, and they'll shoot like a shot, and they'll use another bit of heal resource, and they'll go back to hitting their shot, and use another bit of heal resource. And the reality is that, like, if they just focus on getting that target to full and then just did damage for a couple of seconds, and then when the resource had started to recover, notice that every time I use my heal resource, I pause the regen. So it's just a vastly inefficient waste of using your resource. So burst heal is good, passive heal through just the mark being applied is good, but don't keep wiggling back and forth between the two because you're just losing uptime. In terms of who to be healing, obviously the passive heal is a very small amount of healing, which is only 25 healing per second. That's obviously going to be a little bit better on a squishier character in terms of like the percentage of their health pool, but don't sleep on the amount of healing that you can do with your full heal resource on a tank. Like, especially when you amplify it with a wave, the amount of healing that you can do on a tank is absolutely absurd. So I like to look at it as I'll probably prefer putting my passive ring on a squishy, but if something needs to be bursted, especially a tank, I'll drop my ring and I'll drop my wave, and the healing output is just absolutely crazy. Okay, so let's talk about wave. So this is going to be our E on PC. It's really good situationally. This is one of the abilities that I think I changed my opinion on more than any other one, because my impression of this character was like, oh, it's got a big old AoE damage and healing, just a big old burst of value, but it actually, it's a little bit more situational than that. Obviously, I coach a lot of Ana, I coach a lot of other support characters, and I think Anti-Nade's a good analogy because I thought it would be more like Anti-Nade, where just using on an enemy tank, using on my tank, hitting backline with it, just use it when you get the opportunity to, unless you're at the risk of dying. But what I found out is that it's just not that great for AoE pressure. It has a smaller hitbox than you think, it has a bit of a travel time, it does basically no damage at long ranges, and is primarily valuable for either a self-heal or a amp on some other target. So basically, when you're playing the angle, I'm not saying to save your wave, but if you're at risk of being dove, you probably shouldn't be using your wave. If your tank is not quite fighting just yet, you might want to save your wave, because a wave on a tank followed by an amp heal, or a wave on yourself followed by healing from your other support, is insanely valuable. So I think for general AoE offensive pressure, you're generally just better focused off using your primary fire and saving your wave for when things are actually getting crazy. Doesn't mean you have to wait for your tank to be critical or for yourself. Using it on a tank that's even half HP can just basically make sure that he never drops below half. But don't just use it on a general clump of enemies unless you're relatively up close and you're going to hit a lot of them. It's generally better to assess your risk and assess your angle first, then decide what you can do with my wave. If I'm playing versus a dive composition with a lot of fast characters and I'm on an aggressive angle, I'm probably going to get pressured, so I want to preserve that angle by holding the wave defensively. It can knock back enemies, it can keep myself up. Don't forget, it also amps your self heal as well, so even though you don't have a self heal besides wave, if your support heals you, you can actually see there in the bottom left, I'm going to get a lot more healing from that support. But like, let's say that your tank is under a lot of abuse, you can kind of wait for that tank to take a lot of abuse and then wave him, heal him, and then he's just gonna be back to full and go back to damaging. So I would look at your wave as a much more situational, depending on how you're positioned and depending on who's actually getting all the enemy's attention. A couple other really small details, especially once you get the wave recall perk. We'll talk about perks later. It is an amazing small room dueling tool. It's basically how you win duels up close. The damage is really good up close. We'll actually show the stats for that really fast. It's 80 healing, it's 80 damage up close, and with the rewind, that's gonna be even more. So obviously it's amazing in small rooms versus duels. And in addition to that, make sure sure that you're not jumping to the wave, because as you can see, it doesn't actually go off until you hit the ground. So if you're like shifting around and jumping and then you're waving, you're gonna add like an extra quarter second to the cast, which can be a crucial error. So let's talk about his ult. It's gonna be the same thing as his wave. Assess your risk, your angle, assess the situation, then either set up aggressively to use your ult. Well, I guess that's the difference between waves. You can actually use it pretty consistently aggressively, or use it to catch aggression that's used on you. Like, oh, they're on me, I'm gonna catch it and then deny that dive. Or if you got a teammate that's playing really aggressively and going in, or has the capability of going aggressively, use it on them. I found oftentimes that if versus characters that I wanted to get close to, maybe more sniper characters, if the angle was really good, maybe I'm playing with the dive comp, I could ult myself and just cause so much chaos. I could do a lot of damage. It gives me a lot of movement speed, a lot of survivability, and it's also consistent because I know I'm gonna ult myself, so I'm setting up before the fight. So you wanna make sure that you're not using your ult 40 meters away and trying to chase down people. One of the biggest tips I can tell you for your ult is to make sure that you have your abilities before you use your ultimate. And the reason why this is the case is because after you use your ultimate, if you're using it on yourself and going in, you really want to have your mobility with both your wave for self-heal and your mobility with your shift to get out or to move around and deepen your angle. And one of the biggest mistakes I made early on when ulting myself is that I would shift in, ult in, wave in, and now if that didn't get a kill immediately, if they had another support ult, for example, I'm just dead in the water. So I like setting up really aggressively on an angle, flanking around behind, waiting for my team to push, pressing my ult, using the movement speed that the ult gives me right from the start, and then I can use my shift and wave to live afterwards. Now, alternatively, if you don't like that, or you're not exactly wanting to get close to those characters, you can wait for them, play an aggressive angle, use yourself as bait, and as long as you manage your HP and the cast time well, because remember this ult does have a cast time, you can quote unquote catch the dive by ulting yourself. Now you might be thinking, oh, but aren't they just going to disengage it? One of the key things with support ults in Overwatch 2 is they're not always going to directly lead to kills, especially if they're used early. For disrupting, killing momentum, creating space, forcing more ultimates. They all dive me, I pop my ultimate, and I'm able to get some damage off of it. Even if I don't stun anybody, that's probably an ult well worth using. Alternatively, if you've got an aggressive teammate that likes going in, Tracer, Genji, Winston, Ryan, there's a big brawl, using it on anybody, or even if that person is a fragile squishy that's currently being dove, like let's say my Ana's being dove, I can ult them as well. That is also high value as well. The biggest decision, I think, with Wuyang's ultimate, whether you're ulting yourself or ulting a teammate, is do I really love my angles? My angle just OP, I'm getting so much damage, I'm just doing free, I love my high ground, I've got great vision. If that's the case, using your ult, if you're not being dove, is you're gonna have to compromise your space. You're gonna have to drop into them more often than not. If you don't like the idea of doing that, ult a teammate, hold your OP angle. If you don't like your position, then there's less risk actually taking those positions. Okay, we'll talk about perks really fast here. I think right now this might change, but I think perks are relatively straightforward. Is my face camera in the way? Okay, so we'll talk about perks really fast. I think these will definitely at some point probably be changed a little bit, but as of right now, Overflow I think is the inferior perk. So when you're using Rushing Torrent, the mobility cooldown, you get a little bit more ammo and more healing resource. Now the big reason to use this is the healing resource is obviously limited and very powerful, so this sometimes can be useful. The reason why I prefer balance is if you're looking for raw healing, when you deal damage with water orbs, increase Restorative Stream's passive healing by 40% for 2 seconds. So for those of you that are doing the math in chat, that's an extra 10 healing per second for 2 seconds when you do any damage with water orbs. So you don't even have to be doing a lot of damage. It just, every time you do damage, it's like Inspire. It refreshes that uptime. So you're getting an extra 10 healing per second on any target that's beamed. The reason why I like this as well is this doesn't force me to think about using Rushing Torrent as another resource tool. It simplifies my thought process. I don't really change what I'm doing. I do the exact same thing that I'm doing, but I'm just getting free healing for free. This definitely goes a long way, especially when you're healing some of those larger health pools. Now, if you talk about the major perks, I think these ones are a little bit more interesting, but still, I think I'm gonna lean pretty clearly towards one of them. The first one we'll talk about is Ebb and Flow, which is Guardian Wave rewinds to its starting location, deals 50% decreased damage while rewinding. So basically, when the wave comes back, it's going to do very little damage, but it's something. It's still good in small rooms. But yeah, I'm going to go with Ebb and Flow because it's not just about the damage here. It's about the double instance of self-heal that you get. So yeah, you get double damage, yeah, but you get even more self-healing and more team healing because if it hits any structure, it's going to rewind and do the exact same 80 healing on the way back. Yeah, so you're getting basically 80 healing there and then 80 healing back, which is obviously OP on your team, but even more overpowered when you're fighting in small, even just not even small rooms. Like you can just hit it off of a wall and a Genji dies you, and you hit him, you damage him, you heal yourself, it comes back, it damages him again for just a little bit, but it heals you again for another 80. It's just consistent value. I highly recommend using this one basically 90% of the time. Now, the other one is Falling Rain, which just allows you to do about 20 more damage, I believe, for if you hit all 3 of your shots. Now, the reason why I don't like this one as much is because the way that you're going to be using your primary fire with Wuyang is going to heavily revolve around bending around corners and a lot of splash. Now, this one is going to do more damage if you hit all 3 orbs, but hitting all 3 orbs generally relies on focused direct shots that don't bend around corners. This increases the size of your projectile, which at first sounds good. Oh, wow, I'm gonna be hitting stuff more often. But it does also mean that you're more likely to be hitting walls, hitting corners, hitting one off the floor. And if you don't hit all 3 orbs, it is going to be doing less damage than your primary fire. So there's situations where shooting bigger targets, shooting shields, consistently hitting directs on up close targets, where this is gonna be a net upgrade, but there's also gonna be a lot of situations when this is going to be an absolute nerf. And remember, every perk is an opportunity cost. If you're choosing this one, you're choosing not to get the value of the other one. So I look at this one as potential, a lot of upside, but more often than not can just have too many downsides. Now for bans, this is probably going to be the most subjective thing. I think obviously it's been a little bit too short for us to say for sure, but I think Wuyang is relatively flexible, has decent self-defense options, has relatively good range options, has some decent verticality. There isn't really any major downside to Wuyang. So you may find that your matchup versus a lot of characters, a lot of tanks, a lot of DPSs, okay, you can help versus a lot of different characters. I think the one character class that really bothers me and really threatens me consistently are flyers. I think that's the biggest downside of Wuyang's primary fire, is that it's difficult to aim. It's even harder to aim on characters that are flying in the sky. So characters like Freya, Pharah, and even to a lesser extent Echo can just be really difficult to land on, because if you remember, the big portion of your damage is going to be using that splash, right? So at further ranges, using the splash, even just getting the chip, right? So when you have a character that's flying in the air, if you're not hitting a direct, you're not doing any damage at all. In addition, those characters can absolutely poke you out. So it's not like, oh, I can't shoot them, they can't shoot me. They just have a net advantage. So if you're really looking for something to ban, I'd probably focus on the flyers. Okay, so we're gonna be finishing off, as usual, other guides with a bit of a brief self-review. This is gonna be a relatively competitive game where I felt like I played relatively well. This is gonna be a Masters 4 to Masters 2 game. As always, we'll be putting primary focus on how I'm setting up and how I'm positioning, and then how my cooldowns are complementing those positions. So in terms of compositions, I'm not overly concerned with my composition. I'm always going to be taking those medium range off angles, kind of going off to the side there. I'm looking more for is anybody going to come with me on the side, because if not, I would still hold this angle by myself, but I would probably put more attention on, is there an enemy that's going to contest me first? And then obviously I'm going to orb somebody on main, because that's somebody that I can reach. Now I get a little bit lucky here. I get a Tracer that's willing to take the off angle with me, so my priority is immediately orbing her, and then whoever is on this lane with me, I can shoot them. Now if alternatively, if I'd wanted to take this angle instead, I probably would have orbed my Sojourn, and then I would have applied damage on this lane instead. Really, the answer is whatever one that you like. I prefer this left angle because I feel like there's a little bit more room for me to move. That's a good rule for Wuyang, but I'm not super picky. Notice again, I'm trying to utilize that angle. The angle's free. I go back here to peel my hazard, but notice that by going back, it only took me half of a second, and I didn't have to leave my angle. I wave my hazard, I heal my hazard, and he's basically immediately back to full. So it was, in terms of opportunity cost, a very brief moment of taking my attention away from my DPS to get my hazard basically back to full, especially now that Kiriko is going to be pocketing him, and then now I can devote it. So it's okay to go back as long as it's just a brief moment of support and then focusing back here. Also worth noting that I used my wave on my tank because I was under 0 threat. If this Genji, Kiriko, Sojourn, whatever, was way more aggressive at pushing me here, then I would not wave my tank. But crucially, I wouldn't need to, because all that attention that my tank is getting would be on me, so I'd be allowed to wave myself. So now I'm evaluating, okay, where are we taking this fight? What angle do I want to play? I'm gonna go off to the side here. I'm gonna help my hazard hold this angle. I'm gonna pocket my Tracer. Genji uses a cooldown after me. I use a wave to knock him back and a wave to defend myself. Forces deflect, and I almost got him there. Shift to rotate out. I don't like where I'm at right now. We're down 1, so we have to back up, but I'm not backing up towards my other support necessarily, because this would mean I'd lose my angle, which means my vision would, everybody would be looking at me and my Kiriko all in a clump, right? So I'm gonna kind of kite off to the side where I can still pocket and I can still heal, but I have vision on anybody that might be pushing this way. They have to choose me or my Kiriko. You see this? So Genji's coming after me. I don't know why my Kiriko teleported after me. I hit my initial primary fire, which discourages him from pushing. Heal my tank. Still holding that angle. Shifting away, but I have the heal. And again, I'm back on my angle. pocket my tank, back on the angle. I'm safe to do this as long as I have distance on the Genji and I have my wave. And you notice that me being here means that as my Tracer's doing aggressive things, when she needs to run away, she doesn't have to run away all the way back to here. She can run to the angle and I'm there to support her. She runs off to the side, I'm there to support her. I'm not inting here, I'm not hard flanking. I'm taking space slowly and deliberately, managing my cooldowns and managing my distance, and I'm in a perfect position not only to help the Tracer, but then also to continue my pressure, because they're backing up away from the hazard and they walk right into the crossfire. And I'm starting to think about my ultimate. Do I want to go in? Not really. Those characters, like, these are characters I want to kind of keep my distance on for the most part. So I'm thinking, should I catch a dive with my ult? Should I ult my hazard? What should I do? Now, to be honest with you here, I absolutely could have ulted my hazard even though we were up one. I think I lost LOS with my hazard. I lost sightlines with my hazard. And so I tried to go back in. And to be honest with you, that could have been an ult right there, even though, again, we're up one. So I instead choose, okay, they've used cooldowns on me. I'm safe. I'm going to wave my hazard and keep him up. But I probably could have just ulted him. I mean, he's in a great spot to get value out of this, even if he doesn't get a kill, create a lot of space. And then that would have meant that I could have saved my wave. So I probably should have ulted my hazard right here and then gone from there. Because my team's off right. My hazard goes too deep, and this is definitely Wuyang's weakest point, is that while he has ranged healing, it's not like infinite range healing. So I'm happy with that ult, frankly. Just to keep him alive in a situation where dying there would have meant that we would have lost complete momentum, but obviously not optimal. Left angle now because I don't have time to rotate all the way across. The good news is that I can help my hazard now instead of helping my Tracer, so it's not a net negative. But you can kind of see how this sightline is just a lot more compressed, so it just doesn't feel quite as optimal. They don't know I'm here. Be sneaky, be sneaky. I try to bend a shot. I miss it. I'm holding my CDs just in case they get pushed. Again, holding my CDs. If I get pushed, I gotta have my CDs to keep myself alive. This is the kind of thing I was talking about with just waving for the sake of waving, and you really need to not do this because this is gonna get you killed. 60 damage on Venture here, I think, which would be about 50, 60 damage, is just not that much. And that's my only self-heal and my only way to keep my Kiriko alive. At least the burst heal, right? It just isn't worth it. I should have just instead used my primary fire and then pocketed my Kiriko instead. It just isn't that good. I'm not being actively contested, so I'm not using the amp heal. And then I didn't hit my Kiriko with the amp heal. And I didn't even hit the projectile because the projectile doesn't come out as fast as you think you should. So this is just one of those moments where, like, I'm just doing wave for pressure, but it's just not worth it. Okay, so we're gonna pivot this up a little bit here because I'm actually gonna choose right side. So I've got my Kiriko, tank, Sojourn on left. So now I'm gonna pivot across to the other side because Wuyang is extremely flexible with his positioning. So I can really help on either side. I'm not like a Zen or a Lucio where I need a long sight lane or a short sight lane. I can kind of do either, right? So I'm gonna go with my Tracer here. And as long as I'm able to manage my distance onto this tank line, I can hold a lot of space here. And so while I'm trusting my teammates to deal with threats here, I'm allowing myself to deal with teammates here. Now, here's a question. Is this position good? I mean, I have a pretty decent sight line. I have a pretty decent angle. I'm controlling the side of the map. It's not bad, right? So when I see this here, who should I be ulting? It's pretty obvious, right? Like, I mean, I don't really want to go in here. My hazard is clearly in. I should be ulting my hazard. So my problem here is I'm gonna ult my hazard. I'm gonna go in with my hazard because he's gonna create a big mess. Now that is one thing. The ult is really scary. Everyone runs from it. I just don't think I necessarily needed to go in with my hazard. This is just, and definitely not waving the full HP tank. That was just not necessary. Ult was good. Positioning is bad, and you could tell it's like, ooh. So this is an interesting angle choice, because this is a little bit more congested for Wuyang than you'd think. Now, my options are limited here. I believe if you do your little shift, you can go up to here. You know, you can take the angle here. This would have been optimal. A little bit more distance, a little bit more spacing, a little bit more vision. But I think that's going to be like one of my consistent themes with Wuyang, especially in maps I'm not as familiar with, especially when I have ultimate. I'm going to explore a little bit, okay? So the problem here is this. Of all the angles to take on this side, I probably should have rotated to here, where I have a little bit more distance, a little bit more vision. This kind of isolates me in a bad way. In addition to that, I use my ultimate in a situation where I don't really want to push into them here. Again, these are characters that are pretty good up close. I don't really need to. Could have just ulted my hazard here and then held the angle here, or even better, held the angle here. So you can tell I'm definitely trying to force the self-ult too much, and as you can predict, post-ult I'm dead. post-ult, I'm dead. Another situation where either a better angle here with better support and ulting my teammate because he was in and I can hold passively here, or taking this position and doing the exact same thing here probably would have felt a lot better. So my spacing with Wuyang versus the characters I was playing versus was wrong. So this time I decided to change up my angle a little bit here. Technically, me and my Kiriko are stacked, but the nice thing about Wuyang is you can actually bend around to the right side. So I have a nice sight line here. I'm helping off from the right. I probably could have swung a little bit deeper here and gone from this for a little bit better vision. I could have punished, for example, I could have caught that venture post-burrow. Get a pretty decent wave onto my team, and just end up using my range here. But you can kind of see me stacking there, kind of expose myself to the venture. I was struggling with, you can see, like, this is my problem. Like, I wasn't thinking enough about this angle, and so I didn't really know where to go. And you can kind of tell, like, that I was difficult. I mean, I could have even maybe looked for an opportunity to rotate here as my tank pushed forward and rotated here with wave. That might have worked. Is there a cast on Wuyang ult? Yes, especially when it's used on yourself. His movement is slippery. You tend to slide. It's a little bit like Lucio's movement, where you can kind of maintain your momentum. So yeah, you can flip-floppity around a little bit. Same thing here, hold the angle. Okay, they push me, manage my space, back off, hold the passive angle. My hazard backs off, which I really hated. If I hazard had stayed here, we would have been cooking. But the good news is that hazard doesn't completely leave, and I'm like, hey, you go in, buddy, and I'll just hold the back line. So look what happens. Everyone's like, ah, hazard, ah! And I'm like, surprise. And then we cook, because I'm still holding the space with both CDs. And then from here, it's just pocket, heal, damage, hold the angle. We're surrounding them. I don't like being clumped here, so I'm like, okay, wave, whatever. Let me just cut off, rotate away from threats, and wrap around from behind, and then we can end up capping, or end up winning. So yeah, TLDR, did an okay job managing my space. Some wasted waves. I think the biggest problem were points of map where I didn't really know where to position, especially on their retakes, not the best. And I think I was forcing too many of my own ultimates versus a composition with a lot of characters that are very lethal up close. So it would have been better to enable a teammate and then hold the space better. However, if this had been a different composition, maybe more Anas and more Zens and more Widows and more Hanzas, or if the map had provided more ways to close the distance safely, then using the ultimates in the way they had would be fine. So your mileage may vary. Yeah. If you guys enjoyed this guide and want to see more content like this, obviously we do educational content guides, lots of coaching as well. You guys can check out my Spilo coaching video linked in the description. If you're looking to support content like this, obviously I don't take sponsorships, so any support is really appreciated. For me to be able to keep this one sponsorship free, the best way to support me is through Patreon, link in the description. There's a lot of cool benefits, as well as tier 3 memberships, tier 2 memberships on YouTube. And again, they come with the same benefits as Patreon. As always, I appreciate you guys' view, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm all right, get down. I'm not very good at this chat. Get down, get down.